Hey, welcome to the start of this new game and this new section. This is a first look at what we're going to build in. It's a random number game where the user is going to generate a random number between 1 and 100, and then either in 10 attempts or 5 attempts, whichever one the user chooses, we'll then have a chance to guess which number the computer has generated. So 1 to 100 is a pretty wide range, so during the game we also get some pointers to let us know if we are too high or too low. So our guess of 50 is too high, meaning our current range is now 0 to 50, and the number is somewhere in this section. We also see the number of previous attempts at the bottom, and we also make a log of the previous guesses, so the user knows which ones they have selected in the past. So let's go for 20, 10, and 1. So now our number is between 1 and 10. Let's go for 5, 2, and now we've got this in 6 attempts. The number was 2. Then we have the option to select a new game and start again with the easy or the hard mode. So as ever, we're going to begin by creating the user interface with HTML. We're going to create this section here, which is a wrapper. And then inside, we're going to create 2 sections. The first one is going to be the wrapper for everything we see on the start screen just here, including the text and also the 2 buttons. The second section is going to be the game area, which we see here. So let's get started over on the desktop by creating a new project folder. And I'm going to call this one Guess a Number. And then drag this over in the text editor to open this up. We can either create a new file by clicking on this icon just here, or use Command or Control N to create a new file, which is going to be the index.html. So let's add some HTML structure to this document, and I'm going to use the emmet command, which is HTML:5. The document title of Guess a Number Game, and then down in the body we'll create our main section, which is the wrapper for both of our start screen and also the game area. So we'll create our div, which is going to be the welcome screen. So let's give this an ID of welcome screen, and also just after this we'll create our second section. And this one will have an ID of game area. So let's start in the very first section, which is the welcome screen. And this is the section which we see just here. So we'll begin at the very top with a heading. So let's add this inside of our first div. So the text is guess the random number. And then I'm going to add a break tag just to place the next line just below. So between 1 and 100. And then just after this, I'm going to create a section which is going to have the difficulty title and also the 2 buttons. So the first one is going to have the text of select difficulty setting inside of the P element. Followed by a div which is going to be the wrapper for both of our buttons. So we can target this in the CSS. We're going to give this a class which is equal to button-wrapper. And then inside we can place our 2 buttons. So the top button is for our easy setting. So we can add the text of easy and also 10 attempts. Followed by a second button. And this one is for the hard mode. And this is 5 attempts. Let's open this up in the browser and see how this looks. So let's copy the path for our index. And then paste this in to a new tab. So a pretty simple start screen. We just have our text and our buttons. And then we can move down to our game area just below. So if we click on any of these buttons, we then take into our game area, which we're going to begin to construct now. Up at the top, we're going to start with the text of your guess. But if you remember from the demo early on, we also do have a button at the top, which is going to be hidden during the game. This is going to allow us to start a new game once the game is ended. So the very first element we're going to have inside of our game area will be a button, and we'll show and hide this inside of our JavaScript so we can create an ID of new game button. This button had the text of new game. After this, we'll add a section which is going to be the wrapper for the text at the top of your guess and also the input. So a level 3 heading with the text of your guess. And this level 3 heading is also going to be replaced during the game to let the user know if their guess was too high or too low. To do this, we can also add an ID, so we can target this with JavaScript. And the ID I'm going to give this is text output, followed by our input just below with the type of number, the ID which is going to be equal to input box, which we'll use later on to grab the user's input. And then since our game is between 1 and 100, we're going to add the min and the max attributes. So the minimum of 1 and the maximum value is 100. Let's take a look. But now this is also going to be on the same page since we haven't used JavaScript to show and hide any of these sections just yet, but that's completely fine for now. So back to our game area, and just after this section here, we're going to move down to our range section. So we've got the text of current range. We'll then update our section just here as the user adds guesses, and then also a section for the progress bar. So let's wrap this in a new section and the p element of current range, followed by a span element, which is going to be for our text, which is currently 1 to 100. This text is also updated during the game, so we can add an ID to this span. So we can change this with JavaScript, and the ID I'm going to go for is range output. After this, we're going to create our range area. Now, this is going to be created by using a div as a wrapper, and then nested inside, we're going to create 3 sections. Let's add some guesses inside of here. So let's go for 50 and 90. We're going to have this green section in the middle, which is the current range, which the user is in between. So currently our number is between 50 and 90. So we want to have this space section just here. And then either side, we're going to have a high and low section to fill in the rest of the space. So this div here is for our wrapper, and we'll give this an ID of range. And then nested inside, we're going to create 3 separate span elements. The first one is going to be for our low section. And let's duplicate this 2 more times. The middle one is our green section, and we'll call this space. And then at the end, this is high. So this will be our first red section on the left, the green section in the middle, and then the red section over on the right. Our final section right at the very bottom is going to be for our stats. This is going to be logging our previous number of attempts and also the previous guesses. So the class for this section is going to be stats. And then nested inside, this will have 2 divs. The first div is going to be for the number of previous attempts. And we'll give this a class of info with the text of number of previous attempts. We'll then have a span just afterwards, and this is going to be for this number, which we see here. So for now, we'll just add a value of 0, and then we'll update this in JavaScript later on by selecting the ID of attempts. The section below is just going to be pretty much the same, so we can copy this div section, paste this in. This also has the same class of info, so it has consistent CSS. But this time the text is your previous guesses. The ID is also going to be guesses, and then display a dash inside the browser. So let's check this out by reloading. And this leaves all of our HTML content in place, ready for our styling in the next video.